Our first question is, how has the Dangote Refinery changed the oil landscape in Nigeria and Africa? So, with the Dangote Refinery, it was commissioned a couple years ago, and we've seen quite a bit of volatility in the prices and also a change in some of the products that are being made in imports and exports. But I'd love to get your thoughts on how this has really impacted Nigeria in terms of oil prices, in terms of how things have moved in terms of exports and imports and more. So, Gospel, happy to start with yourself.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I think it was really, really important for the refinery, Dangote Refinery, to have started. Taking a cue back, to a couple of years now, we all know about the Nigerian refinery situation. We've got refineries in many parts of the country, a few parts of the country rather, but none of these refineries over the period of time have been working, and the conditions around privatizing some of the refineries as well. Mind you still have some oil-related activities happening that might not be seen as legal of some sort. It's just that those activities will happen via the conventional refinery. So the refineries have stopped working for a long time, and Nigeria has had very interesting conditions around the oil sector generally, being the fact that it also it makes about over 75% of our foreign exchange earnings, and a huge part of our external reserves as well, and many of the budgetary allocations and the planning and all that have been set based off on the oil sector. However, the Nigerian economy is also very diversified away from oil. Is what's setting that context from the get-go. But I think Dangote saw the opportunity there, and he made a move to become the first, Nigerian to sort of have that privatization approach to how refineries can be set up and how they can work to sort of also reduce the demand of imported refined fuel and the likes to meet local demand. However, that has not significantly also reduced prices. Demand hasn't dropped. I personally think that the context around the demand for fossil fuel products or fuel in this context from Nigerians is also hinged on the fact that we have a really weakening power sector. If 50 to 70% of our power challenges in Nigeria were fixed, I don't think that we'll be faced with the kind of demand, that we have locally in Nigeria. So just what setting all that first of all, but I would also love to hear more from my colleague.
No, thanks for having me, and you shared a lot of really good insights about the history of the Dangote Refinery and how we really needed the refinery to come on board. I think the capacity that the refinery is coming with is something very noteworthy. I think the goal at the moment is a 650,000 barrel capacity refinery, with the goal to expand to about 1.4 million barrels per day in 3 years. I think that's the goal that Dangote has set, and that significantly plays a role in the region in general, but of course more particularly in Nigeria, given that, growing up, everything that we always talked about was the fact that we exported the oil to get refined, and it got brought back into the country, and that was expensive. But now you have a player that has come on board and has said, why don't we do it in the country? Of course, we had refineries before Dangote came on board. Notably, we had the Warri Refinery, the Kaduna Refinery, and the Port Harcourt Refinery, but none of them have been properly been in operation for quite a while, especially the Kaduna Refinery that hasn't produced in the last decade. This one touches me quite personally because I used to live in Kaduna, and so it's quite sad that we had those facilities that didn't quite live up to expectation. But I think Dangote Refinery coming on board has brought some light into that sector.
Fascinating, and it's become one of the biggest refineries in the world. Like you said, 650,000 barrels of oil being processed into refined products, which is very a big task. I wanted to ask though, because you talked about the fact that Nigeria exports quite a bit of crude oil, but when it comes to before the Dangote refinery, they imported quite a lot of those refined products to fuel the aviation and plastic products too. So now it's been a couple of years. I'm assuming we've seen quite a lot of exported products now from Nigeria being refined products. Is that what has taken into place to come into fruition?
Should I kick
Yeah,
off?
cool.
Yeah, I think not even to talk about like a lot of data. I'll just talk about May 2026, which was a month ago. Um, Dangote was announced to be the highest exporter of jet fuel in the whole region.
Oh.
And that was testament, or that is testament to the fact that the refinery is quite useful to the region. And we're moving from being a net importer to being a net exporter. But it's not just to the world, but also to the other African countries. We keep talking about the fact that the growth of Africa is hinged on the need for energy. And so being a net exporter means that we have enough to cater for our own needs and have surplus to send out. And I think jet fuel is one to really talk about because, you know, we live in the global economy now. You might need to fly out tomorrow, and then you know, with the wars happening, people are already talking about airlines running out of fuel in a few months. But Africa coming on board and being able to produce and also being able to export, I think really changes the landscape for a lot of things.
Definitely. And can I ask, Gospel, I'll hand it to you. So obviously when we were importing a lot of those refined products, particular fuel, much of it was from Western countries and also India's Netherlands, India will import tons and tons of fuel. And now Nigeria is exporting these products. They no longer need a lot of these imported products. How was there maybe a pricing war? Was this challenged by maybe counterparts that lost a huge amount of revenue as a result of the Dangote Refinery coming into place, producing all of these products?
Well, I mean, you expect some market kickbacks from the dynamics of how this has played out. You know, an economy that used to import lots of refined products suddenly now has a major player who's exporting those refined products. So you already have players who are bringing in those refined products. They want to, you know, keep at the game. They want to have their product still coming, you know, at a particular price set and all of that. So there is competition, you know, even with Dangote, there's competition. But the big question would then be that, are there any incentives to encourage more of that Dangote, you know, private refinery model locally in Nigeria, and how those incentives work to ensure that, you know, there is more control around the value chain locally, you know, whether or not it's just Dangote, you know, just having more players at that level who can, and it's okay. It's likely going to be an oligopolistic market because it's not a market any kind of person can just go into, you know. So you probably have 2, 3, 4 top players who might be doing that level of, you know, refining locally, just like Dangote has done. So I think there has to be, you know, some more, you know, strategic incentives to pull people away from just bringing in imported refined products to join or emulate, in quote, that private sector led model, you know, and there are individuals who, you know, have the wherewithal to put that off locally, and also to say that you also don't want to run the risk of too much dependence on you know, a single private sector led model, which is good for the local economy, but, you know, you need a minimum level of about 2, 3, 4 players leading the pack in that space to ensure that there is, you know, full on sort of maximizing the market value from what we have the potential to, and also looking at even the Warri, Port Harcourt and Kaduna refinery. What does that look like in terms of probably privatizing them, or, you know, finding other models that could work to get more private sector players involved? And don't forget, like I mentioned earlier, there is still, you know, some form of refining ongoing. It's just that it's not happening in the conventional route that people expect to happen. So it's and I talked about this a few times. How do you incentivize people, you know, from that informal space of refining to a more formal space, if you get what I mean, you know, and how do you encourage more local players to get more formally engaged in the refining of oil and all of that? So a lot of refining still happens locally. It's just that it's not formal, you know, and all that. So I think Nigeria has what it takes to get its market dynamics right, you know, and to encourage that collaborative, in quote, model towards privatization and making the most of what the gains could be for the region.
Sure,
Really.
sure. No, and it's part of the commentators have mentioned just the power that the refinery in Aliko has at the moment. And so, like you said, privatization and that competition could be key in the future. We're just coming up to the time now. So, Musa, I'll just pass it on to you. So, I know you've done a few pieces on the Dangote Refinery, and we've talked about it more than one in terms of the impact that it's had last year. So, it'll be very interesting to get your thoughts so far on how it's changed the whole landscape in Nigeria and in Africa.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think, as my colleagues has already mentioned, and just with what Gospel has just mentioned, right? The Dangote Refinery, more than anything, I think, is just giving a lot of people like the confidence required when it comes to industrialization, especially at scale. The changing landscape is just really just tied to the viewpoint that for 50 years, local refineries in Warri, local refineries around the country, run by NNPC, gave reasons why it could not work. But with the planning started from 2013, but then by 2024, of course, Dangote comes in and shows that okay, like we can actually refine. And as at this year, I think for PMS, that's petrol, premium motor spirit, he supplies 62% of Nigeria's petrol. And if you take this into context, right, into what is happening in the world today, which I know we'll get to like later in the next questions. Without the Dangote refinery, I think a lot of Nigerians and the country as a whole will have been in bigger exposure, will have experienced more risks, and will have basically seen a net impact that will have been very unsustainable for household incomes and also for government stability. So more than anything, I think it's the perception of what he has done, just not to repeat the points that have already been mentioned, but the perception of what Dangote has done, the belief and the capacity to tell people that, like this can be done in a country like Nigeria. And more than that, like more than just 600,000 barrels, we can do way more and do 1.4 million barrels within the next couple of years.
Liking this video so far, please take a moment to give us a like, hype, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so you never miss an update from us. For more deep dives and one-on-one interviews, you can listen to our podcast, Afribond Sessions, either here on YouTube or on Spotify. On the Afribond Sessions, we speak with leaders and key stakeholders across Africa and the African diaspora to explore the business, the ideas, and trends shaping the continent. You can also visit our website to learn more about the work we do at Afribond and our upcoming events.